Good morning, everyone. My name is Hiba, and today we will present the topic of green bonds and greenwashing directive. Before we start, it's important to define some key words, such as. So before we start, our outline, it's first the part is about an overview of the legal framework, and then case study analysis, and finally innovation ideas and recommendation for business decision making. So before we start, it's important to define some keywords such as green bonds, greenwashing, and European Union Sustainable Finance Agenda. Green bonds are the fixed income instruments that raise capital with measurable environmental benefits. So to ensure legitimacy, green bonds must satisfy some standards such as transparency, reporting, and use of proceeds. Then we have the terms of greenwashing. Greenwashing is the misleading or the exaggerated claims about how friendly environmentally a product or investment it is. It becomes a major problem such as money flows into sustainable finance. That's where the European Union Sustainable Finance Agenda comes to fight greenwashing. European Union introduced some key framework regulators such as the European Union Green Bond Standard and the Greenwashing Directive. These initiatives come to make sure that green bonds are transparent and it makes climate actions. So now Hamza will present the legal framework for green bonds at European Union level. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Today we'll be discussing the legal framework for green bonds, which are fixed income financial instruments used to raise capital specifically for environmental projects. These instruments are very important because they channelize the private capital into projects that support the EU's Green Deal objective. However, the key challenge for this was to ensure that what is labeled as green. And for this problem, there was a need for a robust legal framework. And in that framework, it was classified as the taxonomy regulation. The second one was Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, and the third one was Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. So first of all, I will discuss the taxonomy regulation. Change it. Okay. So basically, the European Union Taxonomy Regulation enforced on 12th July 2020. This regulation defines that what basically green is. So for defining the green, it's classified and it maintains the environmental objectives. It ensured that there are 6 environmental objectives in which the European Union Taxonomy Regulation has introduced. And these regulations, and then 6 objectives was climate change mitigation, climate change adaptation, and water and marine resources as transition to a circular economy, pollution prevention and control, the protection and restoration of biodiversity and ecosystem. So whenever a company wants to ensure the green bond, it must mitigate and ensure that in one of these 6 environmental objectives, it must ensure it. And the second, it was that it must not significantly harm any other environmental objective. For example, if a wind turbine contributes to climate change mitigation, but it might harm protected habitats, so here it violates the second notable rule, that is that DNSH principle, that is do not significant harm any other environmental objective. After this, here comes the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation that came into force on 27 December 2019. And it basically requires financial institutions to disclose how sustainability risks and impacts are considered in their investment decisions. And secondly, it targets market participants like asset managers and requires them to disclose how ESG risks are integrated into decisions. And secondly, how potential negatively the impact of their investments on society and the environment. It has also classified the goods, financial products into three articles. That is article number 6, where we have financial products that are not promoting the ESG goals. The second article, article 8, is that promotes the ESG, and it is also called as light green. However, the third article is fully sustainable, that promotes the dark green. So if a company violates any article, so the company is legally fined. The third, here comes the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. So it came into force on 5th January 2023, and it replaced the old non-financial reporting directive. Its objectives includes that it requires the companies to report detailed ESG data using the new European sustainability reporting standards. And it also ensures that the reports include how sustainability issues impact the company and how the company affects the society and the environment. And thirdly, the reports under the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive must also be digitally tagged for machine readability and to ensure the transparency and comparability. To conclude, these regulations collectively create a comprehensive legal ecosystem which ensures green bonds truly contribute to environmental goals. Please. Hamza. Thank you. Hiba.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lejana Joyd. Now let's dive into the implications of EU's Green Bond Framework to small medium enterprises. Let's start with the supportive measures and simplified compliance for SMEs. There are lighter reporting rules. That is, in order to reduce the heavy burden of reporting, the EU has come up with lighter reporting rules such as the simplified version of CSRD, which is called VSME, that is Voluntary Standards for SMEs, and tools like EU Taxonomy Compass, which is an online tool which shows how your project qualifies as green or not. Then subsidies in some countries. For example, EU has come up with initiative where in Denmark, 50% of the cost of the external review is subsidized by the government. Next, the templates from the European Investment Bank and other EU bodies have simplified the annual reporting, which is a complex task faced by all the SMEs. The barriers to accessing green bond instruments. Higher cost of external assessment. As we mentioned before, external review is quite expensive for SMEs to meet, as the accredited verifiers such as the Sustainalytics, they charge higher fees for their service. Limited internal expertise to interpret the complex regulations. In case of the big companies, they are already equipped with ESG experts and other sustainability teams, so they can understand and comply with the EU's green finance laws and regulations. On the other hand, for SMEs, they have smaller staff and less expertise who lack knowledge in complex EU green finance regulations such as the taxonomy, CSRD, and SFDR. Administrative load persists despite the available templates. Although the European Investment Bank and other bodies have come up with ready-to-use templates and guidelines to ease up the process, it is still a big task for SMEs to cope up with the requirements. Therefore, the big companies will dominate the market, and it will reduce the chance of even having diversity in the market. Next, we have the consequences for SMEs' participation in the green finance. Lower engagement, many SMEs opt out of green bond issuance. If the small medium enterprises are not actively participating in the green bond economy, it means that at some point it may even discourage them from issuing the green bonds, reduce investor interest due to weaker transparency and trust. Although the SMEs issue the green bonds, they are still have to face the task of gaining the trust of the investors. The investors prefer clear, detailed, and verified ESG information, which the SMEs lack to provide. Therefore, it will reduce their trust and it will decline the demand for their bonds, and it will adversely affect their fundraising. Lost opportunities for growth and EU sustainability contributions. If the SMEs are not actively participating in the green bond activities, it will mean that they will miss out on major benefits such as lower cost of capital, the gaining trust from the ESG investors, or even higher reputation as a green company. And it may even mean that they will contribute less to EU's green goals or the sustainability contributions. Thank you.
Hi everyone. So I am Deepak and I'm going to talk about the opportunities for the small, medium-sized enterprises and issuing green bonds. So starting from the first, higher transparency. By following and referring to the green bond framework, transparency for investors is increased and it helps reduce the risk of greenwashing. Coming to the second point, increased reputation. Green bonds helps makes an issuer environmental strategy more visible. According to the Flammer 2021, stock returns increased by an average of 7 basis points in the short period around green bond issuance announcement. Now coming to the third point, which is new clientele of investors. Issuers can attract investors who focus on principle for responsible investment, PRI. Carbon reduction offsetting carbon premium. Flammer 2021 shows that direct investments in green projects allow firms to reduce their carbon footprint and consequently attract institutional investors' demand for green firms. Thank you.
Hello everybody, my name is Senda and we will talk together about critical analysis. Our current rules proportionate for small and medium enterprises. Green bonds regulation too complex and expensive. There are many rules requiring detailing reporting, certification, and audits. The second question for me is, are enforcement mechanisms sufficient? Those mechanisms should ensure that green bonds truly fund green projects, not just greenwashing or pretending to do marketing, etc. So relies on self-reporting and third-party verification. Now moving to the over-regulation. There are many risks of over-regulation here. Those rules can slow down the innovation of enterprises, reduce the number of participation due to high compliance costs and complex process. Also, can do to fragment markets because of the different rules and the incompatible regulation between the countries. So here it's hard to use green bonds globally. Thank you. My name is Senda.
So in February 2023, three environmental NGOs filed a climate lawsuit in France. The target here was BNP Paribas, one of the biggest banks in Europe and in France. And what makes this case so interesting is that it's the first climate lawsuit against a bank and not an oil company. So the first time against a commercial bank, based on the law in French duty of vigilance law passed in 2017. And this law requires large companies to identify and prevent environmental and human rights in the process of what they are doing. And BNP Paribas presents itself as a leader in the ESG finance world. Between 2018 and 2023, the bank issued over 10 billion in green bonds, so a very big amount. And it's also a member of the Net Zero Banking Alliance, with the clear goal to eliminate the risk of climate change. And despite that, the NGOs that filed the lawsuit claimed that BNP is continuing to finance fossil fuel projects, and this goes directly against their Net Zero Banking Alliance. And also the plaintiffs are not seeking really damages, but they want the order to stop the financing of new fossil projects. The plaintiffs argue that BNP supports the fuel fossils directly contradicts the Paris Agreement, which you all know is the climate change of 1.5 degree, and BNP has no real plan to prevent this or in the future. And yeah, it's about what BNP is saying globally as being a green company or embodying green bonds, but actually they are supporting fossil fuel project, which is directly against the Paris climate agreement.
BNP Paribas has responded to criticism over its financing of fossil fuel projects by emphasizing its commitment to ESG strategies and climate goals, particularly its pledge to reach net zero by 2050. The bank argues that transitional fossil fuel financing is essential for a realistic energy transition and justifies its actions by framing its role as a financial intermediary, not a direct emitter. Furthermore, BNP Paribas contends that existing legal frameworks such as France's vigilance law should not apply to financial service providers in the same way they do in the industrial entities. This case marks the first application of the French vigilance law to the financial sector, potentially extending ESG liability to banks. As such, it sets an important legal precedent that could influence other EU member states, especially as the EU moves toward stricter sustainability and due diligence regulations. Additionally, it may significantly impact the green bond market as the case contributes to heightened scrutiny regarding greenwashing practices and transparency in sustainable finance.
So now we come to the consequences and possible developments. So the short-term consequence is a legal review of ESG portfolios. That means that banks must re-evaluate ESG investments, particularly those in traditional fossil sectors. The midterm consequences is the pressure on the EU to tighten the green bond rules. The EU is likely to tighten the taxonomy and disclosure regulations for green bonds and banks in generally. And the long-term, its potential liability framework for ESG violation. If courts attribute co-responsibility for financing, real liability risk emerge. And general consequences of this is the declining trust in voluntary ESG standards. Now we come to the conclusion of our case study. So the BNB case is a turning point in ESG finance law. The case shows that the ESG strategies must legally safeguarded and not just communicated, and the green finance become legally actionable. Also, the responsibility for green bonds fund location is not delegible, and the EU must define strict ESG laws and clarify which are clearly and bindingly. And the ESG can no longer remain a voluntary label. So now Moritz will present you some conclusions for the case study.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Moritz Werner, and now that we've been busy with the main contents, how do we make it applicable and finally implement it into the case study? Let's say the company launches a new line of glasses, eco-friendly glasses, be it sunglasses, ski glasses, whatever. And the participants of the case study, mostly as students, could choose between 3 different actions as a part of the sustainability strategy of the company. So the high-risk approach would be marketing those glasses as sustainably produced and climate neutral, but without any third-party certification. And to make it a little bit more interesting and tricky, this approach could lead to a short increase in sales in the first period after making this decision, but to a much steeper decrease once the greenwashing would be exposed due to some legal penalties and reputational damage. The neutral option would be to soften the language a little bit. So you would simply say that you're working on sustainability, but without making some specific promises, which would be the safer approach legally, but on the other side, you would be missing out on the growing demand of eco-conscious consumers. And the best solution in this case would be to conduct a full environmental audit, verify all claims via some independent certifications, and clearly communicate your impact data. This would be definitely the highest cost approach, but on the other side, it would ensure the legal compliance and also boost the trust of your consumers, which would increase your customer loyalty. So then in this simulation, each of these paths would impact your ESG rating, your customer loyalty, and finally your financial outcomes. Thank you.
That's it. Yeah, thank you. Any questions from the audience? What a surprise. Okay, so you mentioned that for the green bonds, one of the issues is transparency, and of course, as a finance person, I would immediately think, okay, the idea is of reducing your cost of financing, so your cost of debt, by issuing a green bond. I couldn't really see that. I mean, there's one point you mentioned. You said there are potentially new investors. Does that actually cause lower financing costs? Do you have any indication on that? I mean, to put it in simple words, you know, if I want to have a credit, a loan for my house, what do I look for the cheapest financing? So I'm really wondering, what is my benefit if I issue a green bond? And is it really something that would boost my sales? I mean, would you rather go to a company and buy sunglasses when the company tells you, well, we have issued a green bond? Do you think that people would rather, yeah, you're already smiling, so I take that as an answer, you know? You would probably not even know, right? Mm. But it's a question. What are your ideas?
I think this green bonds, it's new instruments, so it might people don't get the risk to investing in green bonds.
Yeah, but that is now the investor's perspective. So are there any indications that if I issue a bond under the regulations for a green bond, that my risk is reduced? Is it because of issuing a green bond, or is it because of my actions that I'm taking?
It's because of my actions. So if I
So why should I be interested as an investor in a labeling of green bonds? From an investor's perspective, what are my benefits? I mean, at the end, I just receive interest payments. I'm interested in interest payments, and I'm interested in the risk situation. So the key question is, does the labeling reduce my risk? But that's a question to you.
So I would have no. Maybe you would like to answer. Yes, please.
Maybe not. Shall I repeat? I ask you, so from an investor's perspective, if I'm an investor in a green bond, I'm mainly interested in my return, so in the interest payments, or maybe in the risk situation. So we could assume that maybe the risk is reduced by the labeling. And I'm asking, is the risk reduced if I have the green bond label, or is it rather for the actions that I'm taking? What is the benefit of the labeling? Does the labeling really reduce my risk? Which would, in that case, it would allow for lower returns. If not, there's no reason for that.
I mean, your reputation will increase as an investor in green bonds. And also, if you're a company investing in it, obviously your ESG score will improve. So.
But does that affect the risk of default of the bond? Well,
Okay.
Everyone might ask the question.
So if you don't have an answer, so I would like to stress out another aspect. So you were considering the case of the emission by BNP Paribas. So the fact that BNP Paribas is the issuer of green bonds, but on the other side, you have said that it has been sued by these three ONGs. So the NGOs, sorry. So this is an interesting point, considering the green bonds. That in many, so the problem is one of the, so greenwashing can be seen from different perspectives. One of these perspectives is that the issuance of bonds can be really green in the sense that the project they realize with the money collected can be really green, but what about the issuer in itself? So I think that the example of Paribas let us also take into consideration these other phase of greenwashing. So the possibility that the issuer in itself is not green at all or sustainable at all. But if we only consider the green bond, so the issuance of green bonds, then the label is correct. So this is what I mean, and this is interesting, in my opinion. So this link, maybe you could have stressed a little bit more the link between these two topics that you have addressed. So the green bonds and the case of Paribas. Do you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. So you said it's very hard for smaller companies to issue green bonds. Are there examples of smaller companies that did that, or are there indirect ways to get financed by green bonds for smaller companies, like pools, bond pools, or that? I'm not so much into that topic. Just I heard that there are other opportunities for smaller companies. So for smaller companies, when they want to get financed through green bonds, are there examples of smaller companies which did that successfully?
No, there is no such case of small medium enterprises that are being successful in the green bond. However, it is basically a new project, we can say. So in the upcoming days, we can see that we will have successful cases.
Thank you.